RCA was a pioneer of American media in the 20th century. They created the first electronic color television system. They created the first nationwide American radio network. They launched the world's first communication satellite and set new standards for the entertainment industry around the world. Welcome back to ONYT. In this narrated history video, I will talk about the history of one of the world's most important media companies and how they brought new forms of entertainment that are in commonplace today. This is the history of the Radio Corporation of America. Let's go back to the year 1894. Since he was young, Guglielmo Marconi had great interest in science and electricity. He was fascinated by the discovery of invisible waves by German physicist Heinrich Hertz. Marconi started experimenting with wave-generating equipment in his household. He wanted to interest the Italian government in his project, but failed. In 1896, Marconi and his mother arrived in England and he demonstrated his system to the British government. By 1897, he sent the first wireless communication over open sea, which was 6 kilometers across the Bristol Channel. On July 20th, 1897, the Wireless Telegraph and Signal Company was formed to further express Marconi's radio inventions. The company opened the world's first radio factory in Chelmsford, northeast of London, the following year. They soon were looking to expand their operations, and in 1899, the Marconi Wireless Telegraph Company of America, also called American Marconi, was established, and the Wireless Telegraph and Signal Company would be renamed to Marconi's Wireless Telegraph Company, or British Marconi. On September 30th, 1906, a young man named David Sarnoff joined American Marconi, which started his major career in electronic communications. In 1912, American Marconi acquired the bankrupt United Wireless Telegraph Company and became the largest radio communications company in the United States. When the U.S. entered the First World War in 1917, many radio stations owned by American Marconi had to shut down their regular broadcasting under a presidential order. The government would take over operations to communicate with the U.S. Navy and planned to return them to their original owners once the war ended. However, the Navy wanted to continue using them after the war. Ownership of the radio stations were passed back to their original owners despite the Navy's efforts. In 1919, 2 naval officers met with the president of the General Electric Company and proposed that GE would purchase American Marconi and make it their radio division, thus leading to the formation of the Radio Corporation of America on October 17th that same year. David Sarnoff became the first general manager of the company. RCA took on American Marconi's major vacuum tube manufacturing industry as it had become a major source of profit. RCA started its broadcasting division in 1921 with WDY in Roselle Park, New Jersey. Although it was the first radio station in the state, it only lasted for a few months and merged with WJZ, which is now WABC. In the same year, GE made an agreement to give 40% of RCA ownership to Westinghouse. However, a restriction imposed by the American Telephone and Telegraph Company, or AT&T, made RCA's radio stations commercial-free. This was resolved in 1926 when AT&T unexpectedly left the broadcasting market and sold its radio stations to RCA for about $1 million, which is equivalent to nearly $14 million today. This would eventually form America's first nationwide radio network, the National Broadcasting Company, over a joint ownership. RCA would take 50%, GE took 30%, and Westinghouse took 20%. This also gave them the right to broadcast commercially. NBC created 2 different radio networks, NBC Red Network and NBC Blue Network. They became very profitable, which helped RCA through the Great Depression. In 1928, RCA purchased the Keith Albee Orpheum chain of theaters and the Film Booking Offices of America and merged them to form RKO Radio Pictures, which would go on to produce some of the greatest films of all time, like Citizen Kane and King Kong. A year later, RCA purchased the Victor Talking Machine Company, which manufactured records and phonographs. This led to a new subsidiary known as RCA Victor. They took ownership of Victor's very famous His Master's Voice trademark featuring Nipper the dog. RCA also took ownership of Victor's Japanese subsidiary JVC and began producing radios 3 years later and in 1939, Japan's first television set. RCA also introduced the lightning bolt logo that would become the symbol of the company for nearly 40 years to come. In 1932, GE was charged with antitrust violation, which led RCA to become fully independent and take full ownership of NBC. 2 years earlier, RCA signed an agreement to occupy a new tower in New York City, 30 Rockefeller Plaza, and make it their new headquarters. It became known as the RCA Building when construction finished in 1933. In 1937, RCA introduced a connector named after themselves for use in their radiophonograph floor consoles. They are still commonly used today. In 1939, RCA demonstrated an all-electronic black and white television system at the New York World's Fair and developed America's first television test pattern. In 1943, the Federal Communications Commission forced RCA to sell NBC Blue to Edward J. Noble. With its remaining assets, he founded the American Broadcasting Company in 1945. NBC Red simply became NBC. In 1943, JVC separated from RCA Victor amidst the tensions between Japan and the US during the Second World War, but continued distribution of records under the RCA Victor label after the war until the 1960s, when RCA formed its own operations in Japan. The war also prevented sales of RCA television sets, but resumed production soon after the war was over. This included the 630-TS in 1946, which was the first mass-produced television set. In 1947, David Sarnoff became the CEO of RCA. 6 years later, RCA developed the TK40 series, which is the first color television camera. It was originally developed for experimental color broadcasts. By that time, RCA's color television technology became standard, and the camera model itself became widely used within American broadcasters into the 60s. On New Year's Day 1954, NBC became the first American broadcaster to present the Rose Parade in full color across America using RCA's color technology, though they were only viewable on compatible color receivers. In the same year, RCA produced the world's first mass-produced consumer color television set, the CT100, which cost about $1,000 brand new. In a strategic marketing strategy, RCA displayed color TVs in public areas. However, the CT100 wasn't a major seller due to the high price. About 4,000 units were sold. Not only that, but RCA's overall television sales were very poor due to pricey sets, and most broadcasting companies at the time lacked color programming. In an effort to increase color television sales, NBC was instructed to promote RCA's color technology.
The following program is brought to you in compatible color, pioneered and developed by RCA.
On September 5, 1958, RCA, in a partnership with Ampex, successfully introduced color video recording on magnetic tape. You're looking at the oldest surviving color videotape recorded from a TV broadcast, An Evening with Fred Astaire, which was recorded that same year. 3 months later, on December 18th of 1958, RCA launched the world's first communications satellite, known as SCORE, which stands for Signal Communications by Orbiting Relay Equipment. Since then, RCA became heavily involved in the aerospace industry, as the company was selected by NASA to develop cameras for several missions. By the early 1960s, most of NBC's primetime programs were broadcast in RCA color, but sales in black and white television sets were still higher than those in color. It wasn't until 1968 when color TV sales finally surpassed black and white sets, as more broadcasting companies switched to color broadcasting. In 1962, RCA invented the thin film transistor, or TFT. This technology uses thousands of individual pixels on a display that turn themselves on or off to simulate an image. 2 years later, Mr. George H. Heilmeyer, then working at RCA Laboratories, discovered new optic effects in liquid crystals, which led him to develop the liquid crystal display, or LCD. They work when liquid crystals are embedded in a display to form an image, and a special type of backlight illuminates it. The idea of combining these two inventions into one came into effect in 1968 using an RGB filter to produce full-color images, and became super popular even to this day. Also in 1968, RCA changed its logo with a fresh, new, timeless look. The RCA Victor division changed its name to RCA Records, which temporarily removed the His Master's Voice trademark. Due to popular demand, the trademark was revived in 1976. On May 9, 1969, the Radio Corporation of America changed its name to RCA Corporation as it had a broader range of operations around the world. In the same year, David Sarnoff retired from the company due to his medical issues, and his son, Robert Sarnoff, succeeded him as the chairman. Unfortunately, David passed away 2 years later. Around this time as well, RCA was making multiple company acquisitions, which unfortunately took a major hit on their financial stability. In 1972, RCA demonstrated color video recording with their SelectaVision video system, but the first retail models wouldn't be introduced in the US until 1977. SelectaVision became America's first VCR system. In 1975, Robert Sarnoff was ousted from the company as he was noted for falling profits and was succeeded by Anthony Conrad. A year later, RCA introduced the ColorTrack line of television models, which RCA claimed to have the most vivid color in RCA television history.
Eddie Arcaro for ColorTrack from RCA.
These racing silks are royal blue, red, and Kelly green. RCA wanted me to tell you the right colors because getting the color right is what their exclusive ColorTrack system is all about. It's a remarkable development that actually adjusts color and keeps it on track.
Before you see the ColorTrack system grabs it, aligns it, defines it, sharpens it, tones it, and locks the color on track.
RCA is making television better and better.
A higher-end model lineup would be introduced a few years later, known as ColorTrack 2000. By 1981, the SelectaVision Video Disc was introduced in the US as the world's first consumer color disc video system. Their superior video quality was a major advantage over traditional videotapes. However, only 550,000 units were sold by 1984, causing a loss of $580 million. These would add on to their already present financial difficulties. On October 3, 1985, RCA announced the closure of its broadcasting division. However, RCA's financial difficulties still continued, and in December 1985, General Electric announced that it would be reacquiring RCA for over $6 billion. The acquisition would be completed the following year. It became the largest non-oil company merger in history. GE decided to sell off RCA's various divisions to several companies. RCA's headquarters, 30 Rockefeller Plaza, would be renamed to the GE Building, but continued to be the headquarters for NBC, which GE also acquired. In 1987, GE sold the RCA trademark and its consumer electronics division to French company Thomson SA, later known as Technicolor SA, who later licensed the trademark to several different companies. And finally, RCA Records would be sold to Bertelsmann Music Group. Despite the acquisition and liquidation, RCA continued to produce various products under its several owners. So now, let's take a brief look at RCA's later years. In 1990, Chipper the dog joined Nipper in the His Master's Voice trademark. Chipper represented the bright semiconductor-based future of RCA's electronics division. In 1993, RCA introduced America's first widescreen TV, known as CinemaScreen. The TV had a new 16:9 aspect ratio shaped like a movie screen, as opposed to the 4:3 aspect ratio. A year later, in 1994, RCA introduced the world's first small dish home satellite television system, known as the RCA Digital Satellite System. It became super popular with its easy installation and small space requirements, and programming from DirecTV. In 1998, RCA and DirecTV introduced the first HD TV broadcasting system with satellite. RCA also discontinued the ColorTrack line of television models. In 2004, Bertelsmann, the owner of RCA Records at the time, merged with Sony to form Sony BMG Music. It would be renamed to Sony Music Entertainment in 2008. Starting in 2013, RCA began manufacturing LED lighting products and tablets like the RCA Mobile TV, which is the first tablet that allows viewers to watch over 100 of their favorite TV stations on the go. The next year, RCA started producing Android smartphones and smart TVs. In 2019, RCA celebrated their 100-year anniversary and held an event at the annual Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, both in 2019 and 2020. They showcased a lineup of their vintage products dating to when they were first founded. So there is the history of the Radio Corporation of America. Although the original brand is defunct, its trademark and legacy still live on in today's modern world. So what does RCA look like today? As I mentioned before, the original RCA Records brand is still around and is currently owned by Sony Music Entertainment. RCA's trademark is currently owned by the French company Technicolor SA, who licensed the trademark to several other companies. Some examples include Vox International, which produces RCA-branded audio and video products like doorbell cameras, MP3 players, and radio clocks. Curtis International produces RCA-branded home appliances like dishwashers, air conditioners, refrigerators, clothes washers and dryers, and also modern televisions. And a few other companies produce more RCA-branded products like mobile phones, computers, tablets, projectors, and more. RCA has a very special place in our hearts. Their iconic legacy is sure to be remembered for generations to come. You will never see another company quite like RCA. It's simply unbelievable how many incredible inventions this company developed over the years. If RCA was never around, what do you think the world would be like? Thank you for watching this narrated history video. As always, feel free to let me know if there are any errors or important information that I have missed in this video. I also want to give credit to any sources that were mentioned in this video for information and media files. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to get the latest updates of new ONYT videos. I'll see you next time for another video. Goodbye.